Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Bright Ideas podcast. As always, I am your host, Trent Deersmid, and this is the podcast where I'm here to help you discover what is working in e-commerce by shining a light on the tools, the tactics, and the strategies in use by today's most successful e-commerce entrepreneurs. In the prior episode, you heard me talking with Taylor Smits, who advises sellers on how to choose prep centers, and that was episode 291. In today's episode 292, I am joined by Kevin Sanderson. Kevin is a full-time private label seller on Amazon who sells on 9 of Amazon's marketplaces, and his private label brand generates approximately $400,000 a year in revenue, so a very, very nice business. And Kevin also enjoys helping others to expand their businesses internationally, which is why he's on the show with me today. And I'm going to welcome him in just one moment. We do have a sponsor for today's message. This podcast episode is brought to you by My FBA Prep. Are you an Amazon seller? Are you tired of prepping your products at home or having the headache of running your own warehouse? My FBA Prep is a network of commercial prep centers with locations in every region of the country for Amazon sellers just like you. They'll save you time and money when you ship into them, and you will be working with real people who have experience inside of Seller Central. Check out Preptopia, their proprietary order tracking platform, so you know where your inventory is and when it's been sent into Amazon's fulfillment center. My FBA Prep provides prep, logistics, and fulfillment services for all types of e-commerce sellers. Go to myfbaprep.com to sign up or get a custom quote for any of your prep or fulfillment needs. And when you do, you can enter a coupon code Bright Ideas. That's all one word. And I think you have to put it in all caps as well. And that will just be to save $30 off your first month's subscription. And gang, for what it's worth, for those of you who've been following me for a while, you know that I've had a warehouse for years. We shut it down, and we are now using My FBA Prep. So, Kevin, welcome to the show.
Trent, I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here.
All right.
So let's start off with the easy one, and then we'll get into the really tough questions, the investigative journalism that's going to pin you down. But before we get to that, in your own words, who are you and what do you love doing?
Yes, my name is Kevin Sanderson, and I love growing businesses. I guess you could say I started off as someone who was a entrepreneur for many years and eventually got into the e-commerce game and became an entrepreneur, and now a full-time entrepreneur as of last December. When I left my full-time job, I fired that boss of mine, who actually was a friend of mine, still keep in touch to this day, but he's no longer my boss. Now he's just my friend.
Probably a much better relationship now, huh?
Oh yeah. Sometimes things do get a little muddy when your boss is your friend, but I'm glad to be where we're at now.
Yeah, well, think of my poor wife. Her boss is her husband. Oh, if she listens to this episode and hears me say I was her boss,
she may think it's the other way around. So that reporting relationship could be a little depends on who you ask.
Nobody email Liz and Fink on me. If you do, I'll send you bad karma and I'll ship it by Amazon Prime. So you sell on 9 different marketplaces. I've heard of people selling on 1 or 2, but you're on 9. So, is it really worth it? It must be. You put all this time and effort into it.
Yeah. So it's one of those things. Like I started out, and as you mentioned, in more the private label game, and I had one product, and I was launching another 4, and this was like, let's say 3 years ago, and I was just looking at how do I start expanding my business. So I started looking into other marketplaces, like eBay, Etsy, etc. Opened a Shopify store. I was like, let's throw these products I have on Canada. And this is right before the holidays, maybe a little bit before that, and about 3 years ago. And I started noticing of all those things I'm trying, the one that was actually the simplest, it seemed like there's some hoops I had to jump through, but once I jumped through those hoops, like running it was the simplest, and that was selling in Canada. And so I replicated that and went into Europe, started off in the UK, and started then going into some of the other marketplaces in Europe, now also in Japan, and recently started in Australia. And I would say it's definitely worth someone's while. They don't have to do everything all at once, but
Mm-hmm.
it's starting with small increments. And, for me, it's about a 30% increase on the sales I make on Amazon in the US. I make internationally, really just by copying over listings and sending over inventory. I'm kind of simplifying it, but most people tend to overcomplicate the process.
Yeah. So, as with many things in life, the devil lies in the details.
Right.
So, and I'm sure there's a reasonable number of details. So let's kind of go down that rabbit hole. Which of the markets? Let's keep it relatively simple for the purposes of our discussion today.
Mhm.
Is the EU of all of the extra markets outside of the US, out of the .com? Which one generates the most for you? EU.
EU generates the most sales as a number of sales. But I would say profit is actually not too far off in Canada, just because you tend to have pay VAT, which eats up into your selling price. Because in Europe, their sales tax, which is called value added tax, is included in the selling price, whereas in
Mm-hmm.
Canada, it's like in the US where they add it on.
Yeah.
So you're just passing it along, basically.
Okay. Well, let's talk about Canada first, and if time
Sure.
permits, we can dive into some of the other markets because it's pretty close, and I'm Canadian, so let's talk about
Yeah,
Canada.
let's do it.
What was involved? Walk us through the process. What'd you have to do?
Yeah. So the thing about Canada is it's English speaking. Technically, you have to theoretically have like a French speaking. But here's the thing: Amazon.ca is all in English. I anecdotally, I can't say that like it's 100% what you're supposed to do, but everyone I know just uses their English listings, their English whatever. I don't even know where you would put French into Amazon.ca.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the products itself, everyone just uses their normal inventory. And from my
Mm-hmm.
understanding, everyone in Canada is okay with that because generally speaking, it's English speaking people that are on Amazon.ca. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to worry about foreign languages, really is my point. And the nice thing is with Canada, to get started, you're really just filling out one form to the federal government, and you're filling out basically to get what they call a business number. And with that business number, you want to get two programs. One is called import export, which sometimes people refer to as non-resident importer. And then the
Mm-hmm.
other program is GST, HST, and that alphabet soup is basically sales tax, we'll just
Yeah.
call it. And the nice
Yeah.
thing is it's all at the federal level. So you don't have to worry so much about, you know, 50 different states
Yeah.
or however many states we have that have sales tax and what their rules are. You're really just going to one state, or sorry, to the federal government in Canada, and you only have to file if you have less than $1.5 million Canadian dollars in sales once per year, which makes it super simple.
Are you saying that the lovely Canadians are making it easier than the Americans?
Oh my gosh, yes. They make it's amazing. Like, and the funny thing is, like, if you were to call, because I've done this before for people that I've helped with the process. If you were to call Canadian Revenue Agency and ask them questions, it's like they're super nice, they're really friendly, and you'd be shocked. They'll ask you questions in return, like, is this for FBA or FBM? And they actually know what the two mean.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Go Canada.
Oh yeah, they do a good job there.
Okay, so that is becoming what you've described as the very, very first steps in becoming eligible to sell your product on Canada.
Yep.
But you've got to get I'm assuming, another Seller Central account for .ca, right?
Yeah. So basically, if you just go into inventory, sell globally, you can just turn on to sell
Oh, okay.
in
Great.
Canada. It's really simple. And in fact, you're actually logging in with your North American account in Canada.
Okay.
So it's there's a drop down and people probably don't even notice it. Let's say your brand name or your company name, whatever it is at the top. And
Yep.
there's probably like a little American flag next to it.
Yep.
You could click the little drop down. It might already even be there, but you could click Canada, then you go into Canada, add whatever listings you want to add, and add whatever inventory. My recommendation is where it makes sense, send it in as FBA inventory because it's going to be a better experience for the customer and a better experience for Amazon, and you'll get more sales as long as your margins make sense.
Okay, so you're not shipping to the warehouses in the States. You actually have to earmark some inventory and ship it to Amazon's fulfillment centers up north of the border. Is
Yeah,
that right?
you're 100% correct.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Amazon doesn't want to get involved in the process of getting goods across a border.
Yeah.
So you have to be the one responsible for it. So it's not as complicated as it sounds. Depending on your product, you want to look into, like, what are the weights and how big is your product, but you're really just talking about sending it across the border. You can use UPS, you can use a freight forwarder. Here's a little ninja trick. If you're using UPS, um, promo code easy or promo code fast, those are two different promo codes that if you have an existing account, generally speaking, you can save 40%. And I literally just helped someone with this 2 days ago, and those promo codes work. So they could get rid of that at any time, but they seem to always work.
Mm-hmm. We like saving 40%.
Yes. It's not as good as sending it to, like, let's say Charlotte or, whatever, Amazon warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
But, the nice thing is these are new customers and new sales that you're accessing that you wouldn't access here in the States.
And so now, we've got registration, we were listed, we've got sales happening, we've got fulfillment happening, but now what about the money? So there's a currency difference, obviously.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think people get kind of freaked out about is really there's two things I've noticed people really kind of are apprehensive about. One, government stuff, which we just talked about a big portion of it. Another part of the government stuff is taxes, which we can go into a little bit in my non-tax professional understanding of it all. And then the other part, as you mentioned, is the currency. So here's the interesting thing. My sister is a sixth grade, or I shouldn't say sixth grade. My sister is a elementary school principal, K through 6 school. And I asked her, okay, let's say somebody had, let's say we're telling someone $1 in the US is equal 1.33 Canadian dollars. So 20 US dollars is how much in Canada. What grade level would figure that out? And she said, oh, that's sixth grade level math. So it's sixth grade level math to figure out the currency differences. So that's one of those things that people do tend to overcomplicate. Now, some of it is you can't just take Canadian dollars and put it into Bank of America if you're in the US. So there are some things that you got to know about foreign currency. So just to give everybody a little bit of a background, let's say you Google USD to CAD, US dollar to Canadian dollar, to get the exchange rate. So whatever you see as that exchange rate, whether it be on Google or xe.com or some sort of site like that, those are what are called mid-market rates. The only people that get mid-market rates are banks. So it's what banks charge each other. So you're always going to lose a little something anytime currency moves. So what you want to do is work out how you can do it the most favorably. So if you put in your US bank account into your Canadian Seller Central settings, Amazon will be more than happy to move your Canadian dollars that you've gotten minus fulfillment fees and whatnot and put it into your US bank account. What they're not telling you is if you were to compare that to xe.com or Google,
it's not as good.
It's not as good. It's about 3-4% you're losing. And they don't itemize that. It's just baked into their exchange rate. So what you could do is save a little bit on that. So one way you could save on that is you could get a company like Payoneer or Ping Pong Payments. There's a few different companies that'll basically let you hold that money in a Canadian dollar account or whatever foreign currency. Amazon will move your Canadian dollars without them changing it into US dollars, move it over into an account with that company, let's say Payoneer, for example, just because that's who I use. And then when you're ready to transfer it into US dollars, you can move that and only lose 2%. So you're going to save about 1 to 2%, which over time that adds up. And then another couple ways you can save money is if you're running PPC, don't run PPC in a foreign marketplace on a credit card, because you're going to be paying off that credit card with money that you repatriated over, lost a little bit in the exchange. And then you're also going to lose a little bit on the credit card when they pay because they're going to have to switch from US dollars into, let's say, Canadian dollars. And so they're going to bury in their exchange rate a little something to make it worth their while, which makes you lose money. So I would always recommend in other marketplaces, run your PPC to come out of your disbursements, even if you're getting, 1 or 2% from Capital One or whatever your credit card is.
Yep. Okay. And then what effect on my U.S. taxes is this going to have?
That is a great question. And the thing of it is to keep this as extremely simple as possible. And this is where people, I think, kind of get like the most apprehensive. You have 2 buckets of taxes. One is sales tax, which that's going to go to the local government. So in Canada, it would be the Canadian Revenue Agency. You can file. There's a lot of services that can help you relatively inexpensively. And then for your US, you have to pay Uncle Sam what you made in Canada if you're registered, let's say, with your US-based LLC, which is what most people do.
When you say what you made, you're talking about profit. You have to pay taxes.
What you made in profit.
Yeah.
Yes. So whatever your profits were. So sometimes people are like, well, I'm not 100% sure. The nice thing is, as long as you have, I believe it's $20,000 in sales in Canada, whatever the magical number is to get a 1099, they will give you the 1099 for Canada, and it's in US dollars. You just hand it to your accountant, and then whatever else your expenses are, and it's all figured out. And my accountant is not somebody that's some big international firm. I think I'm the only person he deals with that doesn't have local, that not all of my customers are local. So he's fascinated by what I do. But bottom line is, it's just basic math. So he's able to figure it out.
Okay. So the next most popular market for, I think, most folks here in America would be to look at selling in Europe. So
yes.
Walk us through what that looks like, because there's some differences, obviously. And Amazon, I think, also has free consultants that will help you to deal with all this.
Yes. Now, I love Amazon. And my suggestion to people is anytime Amazon calls you, you pick up the phone because you want to know what they have to say. So I'll walk through a couple different ways you could do Europe, and one of which is Amazon's preferred method, and one is the way I would suggest, which is a little different. Because at the end of the day, no one really knows what it's like to sell internationally like another seller. So, the people at Amazon, they're well-intentioned, but they only know what they only know because they know their piece of the silo, so to speak, that they're in. So if you're going into Europe, you can basically look at the European Union almost kind of like the United States, where each country is like a state, but just a little different than that. So Europe, once you kind of figure out the VAT structure, the value-added tax, it starts to make sense, but there's a lot of landmines if you're not sure. So the simplest way to look at it is wherever inventory gets imported into a country, you're responsible for VAT. Because if you're going to hold it in that country, you're responsible for that. So what I recommend doing is you do what's called the European Fulfillment Network. So you start into the UK, you register for VAT, you register for what's called a EORI number, which is basically their importer number, which is the same thing as your VAT number with like 3 zeros on the end. And then you will be able to sell to Germany, France, Spain, and Italy, the other 4 marketplaces. Now, in those other marketplaces, you do have to get your listings translated, which is another level of complexity, which is why I recommend starting off just in the UK because it's at least English speaking. A lot of times people, they really want to do Germany because sales oftentimes are higher in Germany. But the issue with that is, excuse me, you have to get your listings translated.
Sounds like you're suffering from the same cold I am.
Yeah.
You now hold the world record for the most number of coughs in one of my episodes. For those of you who aren't watching video, poor Kevin is coughing up a lung in his office and has been kind enough to mute his microphone. Hopefully he will be back from the nearly dead here in just a moment.
All right, so I put in my Ricola. I think it's German or Swiss or something. So it's from Europe, and looks like the letters are kind of German. So hopefully that helps. But anyway, yeah. So bottom line is, start with what's called the European Fulfillment Network. If you talk to Amazon, they're going to want to suggest that you do what's called European Fulfillment Network, because as I was mentioning before, if you house inventory in a country, so if you store it there, you're responsible for VAT. So if you have inventory in Germany, you're responsible for Germany. They want you to do what's called Pan-EU, where you're responsible for VAT in 7 countries. The 5 countries they have marketplaces, and then the Czech Republic and Poland. The issue is it's extremely expensive and time consuming to be compliant on that. Now, Amazon likes that because it's almost kind of like in the US, where you have, let's say Amazon will move your stuff from Illinois to Nebraska, and they'll just do it. Whereas in Europe, they will only move between countries for storage purposes if you let them, because now you're on the hook for VAT. I would just stay with the UK. You'd have to sell a lot of units to make it worth your while to do pan-European. Even though you do save a little bit on the fulfillment fees, I would avoid it like the plague.
Okay, so you're not selling in Germany, and you're not selling in France and the other markets in the EU. You're just selling in the UK. Did I understand that correctly?
Oh, no. Sorry. Let me rephrase that. I'm actually in all 5 marketplaces, but because goods can move around the European Union freely. Okay. It's just the storage of them is where you have VAT requirements.
So if somebody from Germany is placing an order and your goods are stored in the UK, are they being shipped from the UK to Germany?
Yes. It's almost like as if I could say, I only want my goods to be stored in Florida. And if you wanted to sell to people in, excuse me, Georgia, you could do that.
And it's still prime.
Yes, it just takes maybe a day longer or something.
Okay.
But that's the best way I suggest doing it, because at the end of the day, it's not worth it to be on the hook for VAT in a bunch of different countries. But the nice thing is, in Europe, you're going to get more sales than you would in Canada. But the issue with going into Europe is that VAT gets kind of complicated. So there's a few things you could do with VAT that you might want to look into. Now, again, I'm not a tax professional here, but the nice thing is in the UK, they have what's called the flat rate tax. So generally speaking, if you are selling in the UK, your responsibility for VAT is 20%, which it's not 20% of the selling price. It's actually the selling price includes the 20% above it. So just to walk through that math, if you sold something for, let's just say £12 in the UK,
yep,
that 20% is actually £10 is the selling price and £2 is VAT. But to the customer, it's £12 total.
Yeah, because 2 is 20% of 10, and they just add it on top.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you could subtract out what you paid at the border, any other VAT you paid into the system. But one thing you can do is called the flat rate scheme. Now, here in the US, if we think about taxes and the word scheme, we tend to think, oh, I'm going to go to jail. There, it's just their methodology. So basically, the way it works is you could register for what's called the flat rate scheme as an online retailer, and you only pay 7.5%. Now, the math is not the same ratios, but let's just use the £12. It would be 7.5% of £12 instead of £10. But the bottom line is you're saving money, and you don't have to worry about saving receipts and invoices and whatnot. You only pay the government 7.5% of your sales quarterly.
Okay. So in terms of getting, so I want to sell in the UK. So I go to my US Seller Central. I turn on the UK just like I turned on Canada. I then am going to create listings, and they're going to be in English, so that's pretty straightforward. If you're going to be in
Yes.
the other markets, I'm assuming it's on you to come up with the translations for your listings.
Yes, and that's where it gets a little tricky because I speak English. I know a little bit of Spanglish from growing up in Texas, and living here in Florida, but I don't know enough to be able to proofread something. So to know the quality of my translations. And I've even had Amazon do translations for me, and they even admitted they were not the best translations. Yeah, so that's another one of the dangers of like, oh, you think it'd be good. So I would go with a reputable translation service. Sometimes they can be a little bit more expensive. But on that note, it could be worth it. Now, sometimes it's worth it just to start out with, like, let's say, uh, Google Translate. I wouldn't use Google Translate long term, but having, let's say, your product available in Germany, excuse me, is having your product available in Germany is better than not having it available in Germany. So if you had to at least put it in Google Translate to at least get the listing up, you could do that.
Yeah. Okay. So by one way or another, we're now creating listings that are in the native language for the countries that we are selling in. You're now creating an inbound shipment for the inventory that you want to send, which is going to all go to the UK. And I would imagine creating that inbound shipment is probably not a lot more complicated than creating an inbound shipment to the US fulfillment centers. And if it is or isn't, like, is it going to be on the air? Is it going to be on the boat? Like, how are we getting across the pond?
You could do it however you like to do it. So this is a general philosophy I have with international is whenever you're ordering for the US, assuming the US is where bulk of your sales is, just split up portions of your order to go to whatever country. Excuse me. So if you're going to the UK, tell them to send a portion of it into the UK, and you can send it to a prep center. Your supplier,
your supplier in China.
Okay. Your supplier in China, or even if you're wholesaling, maybe you have wholesale goods that you can send across the pond or whatever the case is, whatever makes sense. But the nice thing is Seller Central in the other countries looks almost identical to what it is in the US, except maybe the money symbol looks different.
Okay.
So the mechanics are all the same.
So not an insurmountable challenge by any stretch of the imagination. Is there anything that I have not yet asked you before you and I cough ourselves into oblivion?
Right.
And deafen our listeners. Is there anything else that I have not asked you about selling internationally?
The big thing I would say is that a lot of times people have this opinion that, oh, I need to wait until I'm a 7 or 8 figure seller to do it. But think about this. It's a snowball effect. So as you cast a wider net, you catch more fish. And as you catch more fish, you can reinvest those fish into other things. So basically, if you think about it, is you can grow your business faster by selling internationally, and you can put that into other things you want to do in your business. So if somebody wants to, let's say, send traffic to a Shopify store or something, they could do that by selling internationally. Or they want to, let's say, grow new products. They could take the money they made from selling internationally and put that into other things in their business to grow faster. Because if you look at it, we do all these different things to grow our business, and sometimes we forget the things that are right there in front of us. And I say selling internationally for me is one of those things that was right there in front of me, and I'm glad I did it early on. Now, if someone's been selling for years and they're not in an international marketplace, now's the time to start. But don't feel that you have to go into 9 marketplaces all at once. You can start with, 1, like Canada or UK.
Well, I got to think that in some of these marketplaces that are much less developed in the US, the competition and the number of reviews that the incumbent sellers have, the gap isn't going to be nearly so big as it would be in the US, simply because the markets haven't been around for as long and competition's less.
Yes, absolutely. The competition is less. And because, let's say, in Canada, you can expect generally about 10, 15% of your sales. It could be more, it could be less. People are generally, other sellers are not as aggressive.
Yeah.
So they're not doing a lot of giveaways. And the nice thing is, too, when you take your product from the US, let's say you're doing private label, your reviews will carry over to the new marketplace. So you're not starting over from scratch.
What? You mean if you've got your reviews on .com and you decide to start selling in the UK, when you create your listings there, you're going to take those reviews over with you?
Yes, because everything matches up either to the UPC code or the ASIN.
Oh.
So what's interesting is, let's say you go into UK. On the search page, if you search for, let's say you're selling yoga mats, if your yoga mat is on there and you have 100 reviews in the US, it might show that there on the search page, or you might have to click into the page for the listing itself to be able to see those reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Now, once you get reviews in that country, those will take precedence. However, your US reviews will show up underneath that. So
nice.
My anecdotal belief is customers in the other countries are used to looking at, okay, what do people in .com say? Because they know there's generally more reviews.
Yep.
So you're not starting over from scratch. So you have some social proof going into it, which is also one of the benefits that makes it less risky than starting out with new products, which I think people should always be looking at. What are my new products? But this is another way to grow without creating new products, just using the ones you already have.
Yep. Okay. And one of the things I think we probably should add to make sure this is everything that you've talked about today is for non-ingestible products. If you're talking ingestible, it's a whole different deal, right?
Yes. So if you're doing, let's say, supplements, you have to get what's called an NPN number in Canada, for example, which is a natural product registration number. I forget the exact what that stands for, but like there's a whole process. You'd have to get new labels. You'd have to get, everything is new. The government has to do a lot more. So anything that's ingestible gets a lot more complicated.
Yeah. Topic for another episode. So,
oh yeah, that could be a whole other episode. But I do have someone, in case someone is selling ingestibles. I do have someone for at least Canada that does the process of getting them approved through Health Canada.
Okay. So before we conclude today, I know that you prepared a freebie for my audience. So why don't you tell us what it is and where they can get it?
Absolutely. So I know we just threw out a lot of information, and I put together a checklist. So if you go to maximizingecommerce.com/bright, I put together a checklist. And then also, in addition to the checklist, which I will send them, I also put together a free Flowster. So they can take an SOP in Flowster where I walk through these things as well. So you can get a paper checklist that they can print out, as well as have the digital SOP in Flowster to walk through these steps. Because at the end of the day, the process of doing this is one of those things that is not as complicated as we may think. And as long as we have all the steps in front of us, it could be another, 6-figure revenue stream for your business, just like it has been for mine.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on to the Bright Ideas podcast to shed some light on how to expand your sales internationally, so that when people ask you, what do you do for a living? You can say, I am an international seller.
Exactly.
Get it out of my house. All right. Thanks very much, Kevin.
This has been lots of fun.